Hey guys, welcome to this acne coverage makeup tutorial. I wanted to create a tutorial like this because we are seriously warped in our perception of what skin is supposed to look like through very photoshopped and heavily filtered models on Instagram and Pinterest, and that is just not real life. So I wanted to bring to you guys a realistic tutorial of a real human with real skin. As you can see by these before videos, my model does have some texture, a little bit of redness, and I do not mean this in a negative connotation whatsoever. I just wanted to show you guys what she looks like before I started doing skincare and any makeup. I always start with the skin prep first, as it allows all the products on the skin to sink in before I go in with any face makeup. I'm an artist that's a little bit messier when it comes to doing the eyes. If I have any fallout, I would rather have the ability to clean it up and not disturb any face makeup. So I'll do eyes first, and that'll give the skin time to absorb all of the skincare that I put on there. So as you can see, the very first step I'm doing is going in with the Peach and Lily All Day Lazy Pads. They are a really amazing Korean skincare brand that I've been using recently, and I've especially been loving these Lazy Day pads. They're very similar to the First Aid Beauty Radiance pads. I think that's what they're called. I use this or a toner of some sort just to make sure I get off any excess oils or makeup that may be stuck on the face still, and this just makes a really perfect base for everything to sit on top of. Now, as you can see me doing, I am going in very lightly. Even though it looks like I'm pressing hard, I'm really not. I'm going in with light circular motions, and this will lightly exfoliate her skin. I do ask every one of my clients if they are a little bit more on the oily side, on the dry side, and she said that she does get oily, but she also has dryness at the same time, which I'm not gonna lie is probably one of the most difficult skin types to combat, because you have to prep it in such a specific way to make sure the makeup does not look super cakey and pill up. So I'm lightly going around and exfoliating all of the dry patches to make sure that no makeup will stick to those. And meanwhile, the serum inside of the cotton pads that I'm using have hydrating properties to them and also light exfoliating properties, so it will automatically kind of get rid of that texture a little bit too. I'm now priming her skin with the NARS mattifying primer. I did mention that she did have more of an oily skin, especially right through the center of her face in the T-zone, so I wanted to make sure I especially put more primer on those areas. This is a primer that almost goes on like gel-like at first, and then it dries down into more of a silicone-y type texture, and I'm going in with a smaller, denser brush. I believe this is a Morphe brush. I'll try to leave all the brushes I use down below as well. Just keep in mind that the makeup products and the tools can only go so far. You do have to practice techniques, because practicing your techniques will overall make you the better artist. The products do not. So if you don't get it right away, just keep practicing. I mean, it took me a really long time to master different skill sets, and even now I still struggle in some areas as an artist, and I just try to practice those as much as I can. Next, I'm going and filling in her brows with the NYX MICROBROW pencil in the shade Brunette, and I have since retired these pencils. I feel like the formula is a little bit too hard. I usually use brow powders, but I was just experimenting with pencils for a little bit. But if anybody has really great eyebrow pencils that are something besides the Anastasia pencils or the Benefit pencils, I would love to know your favorites. So anyways, I'm just filling her brows in here. I try to match the darker parts of her hair just so they show up a little bit more. I'm starting right at the front of the brow and just outlining underneath the arch. This will give it a more defined shape along the way. Now, brows are one of the areas that I do struggle in filling in sometimes with people, because some people do not clean up their brows. They have a really interesting shape sometimes, and it's just really hard to know where to draw the line sometimes. So yeah, I am just making sure to carve up underneath the brow, and then once I have a defined shape, I'll go on top and kind of start filling in a little bit. I've never been the person who does a super structured Anastasia dip brow. I usually do pretty natural looking brows. So if you do have a more natural style or tend to gravitate toward that a little bit more, I would highly suggest that you start drawing your brows in the way that the hairs are growing. So if you can't tell, I did flicking up motions on the front of her brow because that's the way that the hairs grow, and as you go back toward the tail, I'm flicking out to mimic the way that the hairs are growing, and this will create a more natural brow shape. Now onto the eyes, I usually have some sort of colored eye base. I love to have it about their skin tone or a little bit lighter, so it makes the pigments and the colors really pop a little bit more. It really fills in any discoloration in the eyelids, especially if somebody has redness or veins in their eyes. It makes sure you have a really solid base to work with. I also use this as a concealer to carve up underneath the brows and make a little bit more of a defined shape. Now the P. Louise base that I'm using is actually a really interesting base. It's more of a thicker, sticky kind of base, and it's meant to use completely wet, which is super bizarre in the terms of makeup artistry, because as a former MAC artist, we were always taught to go in with MAC paint pots and set our bases with eyeshadows or set our base with translucent powder. With the P. Louise bases, These work the best when you don't set them with anything. If you think about it, this actually makes sense. So if you have a stickier base that's completely cream and doesn't dry down, your eyeshadows will automatically stick to it, and I don't have any problems blending it out. I've had zero issues with blending shadows on top or putting pigments on top. They're just honestly a miracle product, and I've had them in my kit for years. The only downside of these guys are if somebody has extremely oily eyelids, like I'm meaning like you can see the oils physically on their eyelids before you even begin. These are the only people that the P. Louise bases would probably not be suited to, because then their eyeshadows will start to crease because of their oils. So in that case, I would use a mattifying base such as the MAC Paint Pots or something that dries down to a matte base instead. Really quick tip, after I fully apply the P. Louise base, I'm going in with a completely clean fluffy brush, and I am just going right over where I put down the product, and this will remove any excess product, meaning that it will start to at least dry down somewhat, so it almost creates like a semi-matte finish, and that way you can apply your shadows right on top of it and it will not crease at all. Now I'm going in with my very first eyeshadow shade. This is going to be from the Patrick Ta Major Dimension eyeshadow palette. It's the lightest tan shade inside of that palette, and it's the most amazing transition. It doesn't lean too warm or too cool, so that's why I find it to be a really nice soft transition color. All of these white handle brushes that I'm using are from a set from Jessup Beauty, and I got them off of Amazon. Honestly, these are like one of the fluffiest brushes that I've ever used, and they're really good quality. I'm laying this color down as a base first, just going in lighter circular motions, and this is going to help all the other darker colors blend into it. I always start lightest to darkest because I like to make sure to build up the intensity as I go. It's easier to add colors rather than take away colors, and that's also the same with your makeup as well. If you add on too many layers at one time, it can get really heavy, and it's really hard to take anything away. Also, by slowly building up the intensity, you can definitely control where the product is going a little bit easier. If you notice, I am using very, very light-handed motions as well. I'm not pressing super hard on the brush. I feel like a lot of people make the mistake of holding the brush too close to the actual bristles on the brush, and this will automatically force you to use a heavier pressure the closer your hand is to the actual brush. So I usually keep mine a little bit farther away, and the more intense I want to get and the darker that I want to have the color be, I usually put my hand a little bit closer to the brush. For the next shade, I'm taking a little bit smaller tapered brush. This will make sure to concentrate the color in a little bit smaller of an area, and that way you can get a little bit more control. The darker that I go, I also choose smaller brushes as well, just so it's not all over the place, and then I'll use that blending brush that I used originally to blend it out. This color is one of the darker warm tone shades inside of the Patrick Ta palette. I'm just taking it on the outer corner of her eye. I'm using packing motions, as you can tell, and then a little bit smaller of circular motions. This also is placed a little bit lower than that transition shade, so you can see the transition shade still shine through. Now this will take a little bit of practice, especially if you are a true beginner makeup artist. Everyone has different eye shapes, and you'll probably never come across somebody who has the exact same eye shape as another person, and that is one skill set that you're gonna have to adapt to as a makeup artist. That's why practice makes perfect. You're going to want to practice on real people with real skin, real eye shapes, everything, and something that is significantly different from yours. Practice makes perfect, and also when in doubt, blend it out. If something isn't blending right, just take a clean brush and keep blending until you pretty much can't see that shadow anymore, and then you can kind of start all over again. Makeup is just makeup, keep in mind. It can be erased, it can be changed, it can be altered. Makeup is never permanent, so please don't let it freak you out or be afraid of it. The more you practice, the better you're going to get at it, and the more confident you're going to get at it as well. Next, I'm going in with the shimmer shade on the lid. I'm going in with the Abundance shade inside of the Patrick Ta palette. This is a really, really pretty light crystal kind of color, almost with a little bit of a beigey undertone. It actually has some sort of actual glitter in it. It's a little bit more of a clear base than a normal shimmer shadow, which is why I like it a lot. It just adds a little bit of reflectiveness without actually being super beaming and in your face. So I'm going in with a more flat kind of brush here and just patting it right on the lid. And then next I'm going in with the darker shade inside of the palette, and this is more of a deep, deep, deep chocolate brown, still on the warmer side. I'm taking the other end of that brush, which is more of a tapered flat brush. I'm smudging that color right near the edges of the lash line, only on the outer corners, and blending up a little bit. Now I'm not actually pulling this into a wing, I just want to make sure that the outer corner is intensified a little bit. Once I'm done building it up to the intensity that I want it to be, I'll take a clean fluffy brush and diffuse the color a little bit just so the edges are a little bit softer. Now going on to liner, I'm taking the INGLOT AMC gel liner in the shade dark brown. As you can tell by the name, it's a very dark tone neutral brown color. I've been using brown liners recently because I feel like they create a little bit of a softer look but still have that definition. If you do have clients with hooded eyes though, make sure you tell them them to keep their eyes closed all the way until the liner dries. Otherwise, it will transfer up on top. But once it dries down, super waterproof. Also, just to add a side note, gel liners are the only type of liners that are 100% hygienic to use on your clients. Yes, it is more of a hassle because you do have to depot it, scoop it out, and put it on a palette, but that's the only way you can prevent cross-contamination. Liquid liners are a no-no, and even I've started going away from pencils as well. As you can see, I'm hugging the gel liner as close to her lash line as possible. My client did have slightly hooded eyes, and when that happens, I don't like to draw the liner too thick, otherwise it can take up the whole entire lid space. This also will make your eyelash application a little bit more seamless too if you do add eyeliner, because it makes sure that the lash line is blended in with the actual false lashes. The other thing you can do with this too, just a trick that I've learned, is that if you pull up on the lid a little bit with your thumb like I am right here, you can actually pull it a little bit more taut so the skin is a little bit tighter and the line will be a little bit smoother. Next, I'm going in with mascara. I'm taking the L'Oreal Lash Paradise waterproof mascara. I always use waterproof mascara. I never mess around with regular, especially during bridal applications, which I primarily do, and there's a lot of happy tears during the day, so having waterproof mascara is definitely an essential thing to have. Some artists do carry regular as well, but in my opinion, better safe than sorry. Now, I have gotten a really good technique going as far as mascara. There's a lot of people, when you use mascaras, that have issues with it transferring up onto the top of the lid. Say somebody has a little bit more shaky eyes, or they accidentally open their eyes while you're trying to apply mascara. It's handy to have some sort of mascara guard, whether it's your finger like I'm using right here. I'm placing my pinky right up on the lid, so whenever I'm flicking up with the mascara wand, it'll hit my finger instead of hitting the top of her lid. You can also use a folded up tissue, or I've also seen artists carrying around playing cards or also guitar picks. I also did want to point out that it's always essential to use disposables. You never want to double dip, so I am using a disposable applicator to apply her mascara. So if you do need to ever add more mascara, you cannot double dip with the same wand you used on her eyes. You'll have to throw away the one that you're currently using and then dip in with a brand new spoolie. Now I go on to measuring her lashes. I'm going in with the Ardell Naked Lashes in the style 420. The best way I can describe these lashes is that they mimic the look of lash extensions. They have a super flexible band, they're voluminous enough, and they also have a little bit of length to them without actually covering up the shadow underneath. And they're just the perfect bridal lash, have a very thin band, so they're really easy to apply as well. So after I'm done measuring them, I'll go ahead and cut them. You always want to cut on the outer corners and never the inner corners, just so you can keep that nice gradient going. Then I will apply the lash glue and have that sit while I move on to the face. Okay, while I've been talking, the video's been going on without me, so let me catch up to where we actually are in the video. I'm using the GRAFTOBIAN cream color correctors, and this is the light version. There's also a deep version as well that I have in my kit. I'm using the light version, and this is just a light pastel green that I'm applying to the areas of redness on her face. She does honestly have quite a bit of redness going on, and I'm not saying that as in like it's a really big issue or anything, but I do want to try to calm that down a little bit and neutralize it before I go in with foundation. Otherwise, I'm not sure that the foundation would actually cover it. So I'm going in with a really tiny eyeshadow brush first, putting it on the areas that I want it to be, and then using a flat foundation brush that's a little bit more dense to blend it out. Now, whenever you are using green color correctors, I see a lot of artists make this mistake in the fact that they use way too much of it. The whole point of color correctors is to neutralize. As you can tell, it's more so taking away the color and making it more her skin tone, as opposed to it actually turning a physical green color on her face. If it starts turning green, you've definitely used way too much. It usually takes the lashes about a minute or so to dry, so once the glue is in between tacky but still wet enough so they will adhere completely fine. How I usually apply the lashes here is I usually have my clients look down all the way without closing their eyes, and that is the exact instructions that I will give them. This will prevent any lashes from sticking to the bottom. I'll go ahead and use a lash applicator to apply them in the center and then slowly adhere the edges. And then afterwards, I'll usually ask if the client feels like they're poking or prodding or feel uncomfortable in any way. If they start feeling uncomfortable, you might just have to tell them to look down again and push up a little bit with your fingers to kind of mesh them a little bit more. But besides that though, honestly, if you place them the right way, the lashes should look fine and sit fine on the eyes. Now I'm continuing on with the little green color corrector that I was using before. I'm now on the forehead, on the nose, and then going right onto the cheeks. I will probably not include all of this just because it's pretty repetitive. Now I'm moving on to foundation. I went in with a full coverage satin finish foundation. This is the NARS Natural Radiant Foundation. It's one of my all-time favorites. It lasts so long. It's really good for all skin types. You might just have to go in with a little bit more mattifying primer if they're a little bit more on the oily side. I'm going in with the shades Mont Blanc and a little bit of Santa Fe just to make sure I match the skin tone that she has on her neck. As you see me doing, I'm taking a little concealer brush and then going right over with a dampened sponge. The sponge is a disposable. I do not reuse them on people. I use them as disposables 100%. So I will throw this out once I'm done with it. You never want to reuse sponges. I've seen multiple different different makeup artists use beauty blenders in their kit and they just keep washing them and reusing them. Sponges are porous and they do absorb products, so you realistically cannot clean them all the way. So whenever you see makeup artists using sponges, or if you are a makeup artist that uses sponges, please be cautious of that. Please do not use them. I don't know how many times I've actually seen this before, but it is kind of disgusting. By using a concealer brush first, I'm able to get a little bit more control as far as where I'm placing it and also the coverage. I usually build up in layers, so I usually go on with a thin layer first and then build up coverage on top as I see fit. This way the foundation does not get super cakey very quickly. I do want to let you guys know though, if you do have a little bit of texture on your face, the more texture that you have, the heavier the foundation will naturally look, just because you obviously do not have a smooth surface to work with. So please don't think that it automatically is cakey. That is just your skin texture underneath. As I had mentioned earlier, I am matching the foundation to her neck instead of just her face. This is especially essential for those that their body color is significantly different from their face color, whether it be rosacea or just a really deep self tan as well. So I do make sure to match their neck as opposed to their face. For this particular client, since she does have a little bit of rosacea and redness going on, I want to make sure to match that. Otherwise, I will literally be turning her face into a tomato. It would make her neck look a lot more yellow. That would definitely not match. Like, it would not be a cute look at all. This is also true, especially when you do have people that are self-tanned, because their neck and the rest of their body will normally be about 2 to 3 shades darker than their face. If you match their face, it will be very, very light compared to their body. Keep in mind that you are a makeup artist. You are responsible for not only the face, but the body as well. If you do weddings like I do, your brides will not appreciate you very much if they have a really low cut V-neck on their dress and they have this really nice tan, bronzy look going on their body, and then all of a sudden they have a ghostly looking face because you match them way too light for their skin tone. So yeah, just be aware when you are matching, try to match it as close to their neck as possible while still maintaining the correct undertone. Undertones is really, really tricky to get right, so you might just have to practice over and over again, but my client here actually has a pretty neutral undertone. So she has a mix of both pink and also yellow tones as well. Sometimes you also get people that are olive too, which is a little bit more of that like greeny sort of tone, which I have personally. And that's also a really fun tone to match too. But as a makeup artist, you'll kind of just slowly start recognizing which undertones that people have as you go on. But again, it's like anything else with makeup artistry. It always takes practice. Once I have the foundation down, I'm going in with the Too Faced Multi-Use Sculpting Concealer in the shade Cloud and Light Beige. Believe it or not, this is the only concealer that I have besides those color correcting concealers that I have in my kit. I don't use any other one. I feel like the Too Faced Multi-Sculpting Concealer is honestly a tried and true hero product for me. I've had it in my kit for the last 3 years, and I don't think I'd be able to do my job without it. It's more of a satin to hydrating finish concealer, definitely medium to full coverage. It honestly just makes everything look really, really nice and skin-like, while still having a really good amount of coverage as well. I don't know, it just blends out like a dream and just sits on the skin really nicely, and I've never had an issue with it on anybody. I'll wipe off the concealer brush a little bit so the foundation is not on it anymore, and then I'll go in right down the center of the face, on the forehead, down the bridge of the nose, on the sides of the nose, and also on the chin. Then I will go up underneath the eyes, so I'll just go right underneath with that upside down V shape. I'm still kind of old school when it comes to concealer. I don't usually do like the inner corner, outer corner thing like most people do nowadays. The only time I'll do a little bit lighter of a concealer is if I have a mature skin type that I'm working with, where there's a lot of fine lines around the eye, or if there's just a normal person that has quite a bit too. She didn't have a ton of fine lines or anything, so I knew that nothing would settle underneath her eyes, so I am applying a liberal amount of concealer just to make sure everything is covered. Then I'm going right up underneath the eyes with that dampened sponge, same sponge that I was using for the foundation. When you are up underneath the eye area, whether you're doing concealer or just eyeshadow, eyeliner, etc., make sure you do pull away every once in a while to give your clients time to blink, and you also want to press very, very gently. As you can see, I'm using really, really light tapping motions underneath, as the under eyes are very sensitive. No matter what kind of skin type they have and no matter what kind of texture they have underneath their eyes, I do go ahead and set with powder underneath. So I'm taking the same sponge again. We're just going to use one sponge for each person. I'm using the Huda Beauty loose powder in the shade Sugar Cookie, putting a little bit on my sponge and then going right up underneath her eyes. Before you do set underneath the eyes or anywhere that does tend to crease a little bit, I make sure to use my ring finger, tap out the excess just so the product doesn't get stuck in the creases. Otherwise, you will just be setting that product inside of the crease and in turn making it look a lot more dry. And I do use light pressing motions to make sure I'm really getting in there. As you can tell by my method, I am using an excess amount of loose powder, but I'm not baking by any means. I'm not not letting the product sit there. I'm not putting on so much that you can see it clearly sitting there. I'm immediately pressing it in all the way into her skin so it absorbs correctly. You can also go on with another layer of powder as well if somebody is a little bit more on the oily side. As I mentioned earlier, she had a little bit more combination skin, so I do apply a little bit more powder in the center and then make sure to lightly put powder on the outsides of her face as well. The makeup look is not complete without doing cream contour and cream bronzer, so I'm going in with the Tower 28 cream bronzer in the shade Broad. Tower 28's cream bronzers are honestly the best formula that I found so far for cream bronzers. They have a lightweight gel formula and they blend in like a dream. You hardly have to do any effort whatsoever. I'm going in with a denser foundation brush for this. I feel like this produces the best results. Sometimes if the brush does not blend it in all the way, I'll go over with the damp sponge. Cream bronzer has definitely changed the way that my makeup looks, as in it makes it show up a little bit more on camera. Bronzers and blushes can easily get lost in photography, and I really want to make sure this shows up as far as pigmentation. This is why it's essential to put cream bronzer down first and then go with a powder bronzer on top. By doing these two steps, it also ensures that it will last the longest possible too. I personally like to use a pretty decent amount of bronzer to create that soft glam sort of look. I'm going under the hollows of the cheekbones and a little bit on the cheeks, and then I'm going around the perimeters of the forehead and also on the sides of the nose as well. As I mentioned, I'm now going in with a powder bronzer, and this is the Charlotte Tilbury Airbrush Bronzer in the shade Fair. Charlotte Tilbury honestly does the best with undertones for powders, and her Airbrush Flawless powders are just airbrush and flawless. I mean, there's no other words to describe it. I absolutely love these powders. I used to have the face powders in my kit, and I think I need to start incorporating those again because they're absolutely amazing. I'm going in with a fluffy angled brush from Face Atelier, and I'm just going right up over top of where I put the cream bronzer. This will just set everything into place and then also intensify the bronzer a little bit too. Now onto blush. I just use a powder blush. I'm going in with the NARS Rising Star Cheek palette, which unfortunately is a limited edition palette. It was for the holiday for 2022, and I'm so sad that they don't carry these shades permanently because they're such pretty shades. The whole entire palette is a really great color story, and they're also really glowy blushes, which I really like. I'm not a matte blush person. If anybody has suggestions though for glowy blushes that are a permanent shade, then I'm definitely all for it. I'm thinking about getting the Pat McGrath blushes, but man, are those things expensive. Oh, also, I forgot to mention that the blush that I went in with is actually a deep peach color with a little bit of a glowy finish. I apologize, I just got extremely off track, so now I'm gonna get caught up with where the video's at. I am going in with a tapered highlighting brush. It's an Anastasia dupe that I got off of Amazon from the brand Do Care, I think. As I mentioned, I'll link all the brushes, especially the ones I got from Amazon, down below in the description bar. I'm taking the Dior Backstage highlighting palette in the shade 001 Universal. It's the very coveted palette that always sells out every single time. Mine is extremely busted, but it still works. I'm taking that white highlight shade inside of there. That's such a pretty color, and I use it on fairer skin tones, and it's absolutely gorgeous. I'm taking that on the high points of her cheeks, right on the temples, down the bridge of the nose, on the cupid's bow, and also on the chin. Then I'm just taking that damp powder puff again and then going right up underneath the contour just to set it with translucent powder because I completely forgot to do that before. That's the only area of the face that I forget to set every single time, so I usually have to make a note to go back and do that. Now I'm finally going back up underneath the eyes to finish everything. I used to do the complete eyes first with the under lash line being before the face, but I just felt like it didn't stick as much and the shadows just weren't as pigmented, so I decided to do it this way and it's been a lot better. I'm taking a smaller flat square brush that's very, very thin. It's one of the Jessup brushes that I mentioned earlier. I'm using the shade Scandal from the Patrick Ta palette, which is that deep, deep, dark chocolate brown kind of color, and I'm using it to get right into a waterline. I always start with the dark shades first and then use a smudger brush with a lighter color, usually the transition shade that I used on the top, to smudge out the darker shades on the bottom. This just adds a really soft, smoky effect on the bottom without making it look too harsh. For the smudging shade, I'm going into that shade Transition, also from the Patrick Ta palette. That's what we used as our very, very first color. And I'm using a double-ended brush from one of the Urban Decay palettes that I used to have, and I honestly wish they would sell these brushes separate because they were the best quality brushes. Next, I'm going in with the L'Oreal Lash Paradise Waterproof Mascara again, going in and coating her bottom lashes. As you can tell, this disposable is a little bit tinier than the other mascara spoolie I was using earlier, and this is because they're actually brow brushes. I've used disposable brow brushes for a pretty long time on the bottom because you get more control and they're a little bit smaller than the other ones. Okay, time to play catch up. I'm lagging behind again. again. Next I'm going in with the Charlotte Tilbury Iconic Nude Lip Liner. One of my favorite lip liners. It's a neutral brownish peach color, I would say. I absolutely love it for all nude lipsticks, whether it goes more of a pink, more of a peach, or more of a brown. It matches everything. I love it. Really ideal for fair to medium skin tones. And then next I'm going in with the lipstick shade, and this is Matte Cream Cup. It's a cream sheen finish, one of my favorites for bridal especially, and I use it mainly on those with fairer skin tones. It looks like a pink color, but it leans a little bit more on the warm pink side. If I had my way, I would personally go into the gloss every single time. Even though it doesn't last for a while, I still love the way that it photographs. So I'm going in with the NYX Butter Gloss in the shade Fortune Cookie, one of my favorite shades, and these glosses smell like vanilla, so it's absolutely delightful. This is more of a light peachy sort of shade, and I think it goes perfectly with this lip combo. Like, look at how gorgeous this looks on her. Love a good glossy lip. The last steps I do is just take the leftover concealer on the concealer brush and clean up the edges of the lips. And then I forgot to include this in the video, but I did set her face with setting spray with the Milani Make It Last setting spray. I also wanted to show you guys that you can clearly still see the texture through the makeup. I wanted to create realistic expectations of what it looks like with makeup on textured skin. Most of the time on Instagram especially, people will post before photos of their clients with textured and acneic skin, and then all of a sudden you'll see these really photoshopped, blurred out after photos, and clients will think that you literally magically got rid of all of their acne and all of their texture, but I'm sorry guys, that's a computer, it's not real life. And then I also wanted to show you her reaction at the very end because she had not really seen herself in full view.
Wow, that's insane. Wow, I'm gonna cry. I look so pretty. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome.
Okay, stop. I gotta stop.
I seriously couldn't have even asked for a better reaction. She was so sweet, and I love that she loved her makeup. This will officially be the last tutorial on my channel, so if you guys want to check out the rest of the tutorials, I did put them all in a playlist, so go check those out. Anyways, I hope you guys have a great day. All right, bye.